What up, world? It's Fess with Reverb, and I'm filming from my front room. Unfortunately, it's been a long time since we've been able to talk beats, but I'm so happy to be here today. And since it's been such a long time, I figured we will go back into time and talk about one of the most iconic samplers ever to be released, the SP-1200 by Emu Systems. Following on the heels of Emu's SP-12 from 1985, the SP-1200 was released in 1987, with one of the main differences of its predecessor being its memory capabilities via floppy disks. I know that sounds like old tech now, but in 1987, floppy disks were all the rage, and it allowed the user to have a maximum of 10-second sample time per disk. So you can imagine if you got an SP-1200 and you're just going and you're making grooves, eventually you got a whole library of floppy disks that, equated to a whole library of songs. The SP-1200 was equipped with 8 audio outputs, MIDI in, out, and through. And with that MIDI connection, that allowed you to use the SP-1200 as a sequencer for other external gear, like synthesizers or even other samplers. As a matter of fact, one of the most famous combinations was using your SP-1200 and an Akai S950, where the Akai S950 would actually take more of the load on longer samples, and you were doing all your triggering via the pads on the SP-1200. Sounds like a pretty cool combo to me. Even when Akai dropped their MPC-60 in 1989, the SP-1200 still remained a stalwart and a high choice among producers from the late 80s all the way to the 90s, all the way through even to the early 2000s till today. The list of producers who have used the SP-1200 expands across the genre board, from hip hop to house to techno to drum and bass. We're talking producers like Large Professor, DJ Quick, Easy Mo B, Lord Finesse, Madlib, Manny Fresh, Todd Terry, Moody Man, even Daft Punk. But few have made use of the SP-1200 like Pete Rock.
Glad I'm here watching this because I'd have heard it.
Hey, your name and the position you're trying out for?
Barry Ann Parker, pitcher.
Wait.
Pete sampled a single guitar note from what I'm assuming to be a Fat Albert record or CD, chopped it and pitch shifted it, and turned it into a 4-note chord progression.
One, two. Yo, we just begun the story. Compound and Nori. Look to the sun for glory as time runs before me. I'm after the day of judgment. I stood before thee.
Its pitch shifting and its filtering capabilities allowed you to take those little bits of sound and really expand on them. But, I'll be honest with you guys, I've never owned the SP-1200. I would like to, but I've never had one. I've never made a beat on one. But I have friends that are highly experienced with the unit, and I talked to one of them earlier, my good friend Nick Hooks. So let's actually hear what he has to say about his experience with his SP-1200 that, funny enough, he inherited from the late, great Paul C.
And that's a hint, my brother, run for cover. Cause I'm on, my brain contains a bomb. As if I escaped from Vietnam. Some people label me lethal. Lyrics.
I've been a sampler head my whole life. I always thought the holy grail of samplers was the SP-1200, or so I was told.
For sure.
And so Noah hit me up, my friend Noah, and he said, I have an SP-1200, and I felt like a shockwave went through my body. And so then he told me it was Paul C's. When I was 13, I thought Dr. Dre was the P-Funk, and then I realized the P-Funk was the P-Funk and Dr. Dre sampled the P-Funk. So I was like, I got to learn about Paul C, and I guess it's like one of those crazy things because he was killed and he never got to become the person that he was supposed to be. To be able to learn through the piece of gear was really powerful. And just to kind of think how all of us, like whether you've put out records, whether you're going to put out records, like we're all a part of this story and lineage. And then fast forward not too long is Serato used to be my tenant next door, and Large Pro came by and put the SP in his hands. also when this pandemic started, I looked around at all my synths and I was like, y'all are older than me, man. Like, I'm just the gardener for this shit, and I hope one day someone's got this SP in 50 years, 100 years, when, you know, we're just little memories of all this shit too. And just like analog tape, just like you know, you hear when you hear a record from the 70s, I think the innocence of 90s hip hop, the innocence of just the sample time, we're not even talking about the sonics yet, but I think when you have a limited palette, you really have to think and work differently than like having 100 million unlimited tracks and unlimited plugins. The filters and the sound and the small sampling time, like, it takes me back to Cypress Hill. It takes me back to Public Enemy, and like that primal feel of that music. I know that I can touch that, and that it's a real way to touch it, and that you're actually touching it the same way. I mean, this was Paul C's machine. I'm a collaborator, and when other people come into my studio, like, they like, yo, like the excitement it brings to flip out like a break that they use from the computer, or add just a snare, like those sounds make your records go to different places, you know. And I guess all of us have to decide if it's worth $8,000 or whatever each one of us paid for it. But it is something that I feel like, as a gearhead, I would say this has never been replicated the way that other things have been replicated. Project per project, like each piece of gear like serves its own purpose. So like, you know, the modular's doing one thing, this is doing the other. And I think when each piece of gear plays a role, you get a little less intimidated by what, like, because sometimes like it's like the software, it's like unlimited options are too much, you know. Like SP, you're gonna be snares, pitch snares. Like Octa, you're gonna be chopping up slices. Like, I need my bass over there. And I think, you know, that's what building a studio is all about, is having it serve you and what inspires you, whether it's a, you know, this is the 90s, like the 80s and the 90s. Like, you go to the Juno, it's the 80s new wave. You go to the Model D, it's the P-Funk. Like, because first you got to reference something and then you got to destroy it to make it yours. And I think you can simultaneously do that. Like, you know, you can reference Prince with the Lindrum, but like just by hitting that sound, but like you could take it a whole different way every time at the same time, you know?
The SP-1200 was discontinued in 1998, and since then, interest around the unit has rose to nearly mythic proportions. When the SP-1200 came out in '87, its original price was $2,700. If you want one of the original SPs now, you're gonna have to shell out at least a good $7,000 to $8,000. That's a lot of money. So what do we do if we can't afford a SP-1200, but we want that SP-1200 sound? Well, thankfully, lots of manufacturers have been inspired by the original SP-1200 and have sought to sort of make clones to sort of replicate that old sound and that old workflow. Most notably, Low His Systems has released their app called the SP app. It's actually right behind me. This app is still in beta form, but it's already reached high praises of some of the original SP users like Easy Mo B and Kenny Dope and DiBiase. But if you're a hardware enthusiast like myself, we have hope, as late last year, Isla Instruments announced their SP clone that they're doing, that they are calling the S-2400. Now, I had the opportunity of seeing this unit in the flesh last year at the 2019 KnobCon, and it is a beast of a unit. It's in metal casing, it has velocity sensitive pads, the faders feel good, and it's also promising to bring not one but two sample engines, both an original 12-bit SP style sample engine and an HD 24-bit sample engine. But if you can afford an original SP, why stop at getting a used one? Especially since earlier this year, rossum-electro Music, in celebration of the 35-year anniversary of the release of the original SP, they're announcing a short run of refurbished SP-1200s. Well, that's all I got for you guys today. I hope I was able to shine some light as to why the SP-1200 is what it is and why it still sells at such a high price point. I highly encourage you guys to try to stay productive throughout this crazy time going on right now. And I highly encourage you guys to stay safe out there. I'm Fess Grandiose, signing off for Reverb. Peace and good health.